Welcome to Code Creative. I'm Travis Tolson. So today we are kicking off a bit of a new adventure. Now, last time we were discussing, I said that I had a secret app up my sleeve that we were going to be working on, but change of pace, quarantine, isolation, pandemic.
I finally got to you.
Pandemonium in the streets. And yes, in-house designer has convinced me that what the world needs is a robust online D&D thing. Now, forewarning, I've played D&D tabletop twice in my whole life, and other people just told me what the math resulted in. I didn't quite understand the system yet. I've played some video game RPGs a long time ago. I think the most recent stuff would be Skyrim.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know how similar that is.
There's some crossover.
Okay.
That's one reason why I like it so much.
So, Sarah, on the other hand, has a
problem.
Has a problem. She is with the Heroines of Hildegard.
Yeah, we're an all girls D&D group. We've been playing the same characters now for 4 years. I want to say I was looking through my notes and found the original stats for my rogue that were from 2016. So we've been doing this a while. The same characters have not died yet, and we've been meeting pretty regularly. Everything from every 2 weeks to once a month. And we recently, because of the quarantine, started tooling around with some online options and realized that there was the options that we found were kind of, they left something to be desired. So we ended up using Zoom and this app called Mural to lay out our map, and that worked fairly well for us, but I thought it would be really nice if I could have all of the information for my character and my spells and all that right at my fingertips instead of like having to thumb through books to find it and all that good stuff. So.
And where did it bring you?
It brought me to ServiceNow because I was like, dude! And many of the people from GlideFast will know I've been kind of talking about doing this for a while because they all know how big of a nerd I am. So this has just given me an excuse to make this dream a reality.
For me, it feels a lot like consulting in my day job.
But you love your day job.
I do love my day job, so that's good.
And you love me, so that's like double the love. So you should really enjoy this.
I should. I'm nervous about this. All right.
You're just nervous because there's math.
This is true. I hate math. All right. So.
Wait, before we get started, did you see they have Mountain Dew flavored Doritos?
What?
You know that, okay, there's this old video called 8-Bit Theater, and it's showing you, like, what a D&D game is really like. Y'all need to look it up. It's hilarious. But in the background, you've got the one guy in the kitchen go, where are the Cheetos? What about the Mountain Dew? So it's almost like combining all the good things in the world.
I'm going to take your word for it.
So anyway.
All right, so first thing that we really have to do here is I have got to wrap my mind around this system.
Yeah.
Okay, so I have to wrap my mind around this system, Dungeons and Dragons, and how this works.
Mm-hmm.
I have to get the concept so that I can actually help build a data model for it. So we have pulled up a character sheet. And I guess we can start by having you walk me through making a character.
Yes. Okay. Mind you, I have not made a character in 4 years because I'm good at not dying. And my DM is very graciously not.
Andrew Barnes says, where are the Cheetos?
Yes, he gets it!
Oh, God.
See, this is why I came into the ServiceNow industry, because I know you people are out there. Okay, so.
Oh my.
I am going to ask you to first roll your ability scores, and we're just going to write them down and set them aside before you pick what kind of character.
All right, so how do I do this?
You're going to roll, and there are a couple different ways that people do this, which is something you want to keep in mind. I've seen this on dice rollers online to get your ability scores. Some just say roll 3 dice, and that's what you get. Others say roll 4 and drop any ones or re-roll ones. There's a few different accepted ways of doing it.
Okay, and this is called
rolling your main ability scores. So this is something we have to keep in mind. You know, different players are going to be setting up characters using these different ability methods. And if you set these ability methods, hopefully you don't have players that game the system until they get good rolls. But, you know. I won't mention any names, but I have seen them.
You guys are actually getting to see my consulting approaches in work here.
Yes.
This is terrible.
Okay. It's not terrible. This is why you don't get to use my good dice. Yeah, those are not my good dice.
Okay.
So roll the dice.
All right. All 4 of them?
Yes, all 4 of them.
All right. Sorry, we don't have camera on this, so I don't know if we can...
Hold on, I got to get a Post-it note.
A Post-it note. Why do we need a Post-it note?
So I can write down the numbers.
All right. How'd I do?
Not bad. So we're going to take the top 3. So you got...
All right, so I got a 6,
you got
2 3s, and a 2.
So we're going to drop the lowest number.
Okay, so we're dropping the 2.
Yeah.
That math I can handle.
Uh-huh. So you got a 12. So that's one score. That's not bad. Roll again. We got to do this 6 times.
Okay.
You have 6 attributes. Oh, that's really good.
6 6 5 2.
That's a 17. That's really good. Okay, keep going.
Okay. 6 5 4 3.
Man, I want your rolls. What is this?
Guess who's got the lucky dice now?
They're only lucky because they're my dice. Oh, that's not so lucky. What do you think of that?
Silence.
Oh, you get to re-roll ones.
What's that? 6 6 5? Oh, that's fantastic.
Yeah, no, you re-roll the ones. Shut up.
Oh. 3 3 3 2.
That's your dump stat.
All right. Again?
Do it again.
Okay, 6 6 6 6.
Oh my gosh, are you serious?
All right.
And I'm watching you. You're not fudging. Okay, one more time. Okay.
I roll plus 12 Angular JS. Andrew, we are creating a character because I have only played D&D like twice in my life, and other people, I only played a little bit of it. They did all the hard work. So I actually have to understand this to be able to model it. So we're kind of playing D&D, I guess.
Yeah. And we could make an easy, from what you were telling me, piece of code to do the dice rolling for us. I didn't know it was as simple as it is. But there's just something about real dice that's so much better.
Okay.
Okay.
So we've rolled the dice. How many times was that?
6. You have 6 scores.
Okay.
Now, other methods I've seen is rolling 7 times and dropping the lowest.
You have to understand what the goal is to design it well. Exactly, Andrew.
Yep. So those are your things. The next thing, the 2 big parts of your character that you have to decide first is the race, which is like elves, dwarves, Tolkien stuff, okay?
Okay.
And your class, which is fighter. Are you a mage? Are you a bard and sing and deal with shenanigans? Are you a shifty, sneaky rogue? What kind of character in this world do you want to be?
Orc, hit things.
You want to be a barbarian.
Sure.
Okay.
Orc, hit things.
Orc, hit things. You can't be an orc. You can be a half orc.
All right. Half orc, hit things.
Okay. So that's other considerations to make, and the class in and of itself has different.
Do I have to fill anything out on here?
Yes, fill stuff out on there. What's
All
your
right.
character's name going to be? Orc hit things.
Orc hit things.
Andrew, you need to help him with name because he sucks at it.
So a physical dice roller with camera to read the pipe controlled by API. You know, we were on a current project working with some OCR stuff, so this may not be outside the realm of possibility.
You're blowing my mind right now.
So half orc, you said?
Yes.
Okay.
We'll get to background. That's different.
Okay. What's my class and level?
You said you wanted to be a barbarian. Hit things.
Yeah. Okay, barbarian.
And you're level 1. We'll start you off at level 1.
All right. So like, are these? So these are like choices.
Yes, those are choices.
Okay.
And each of those choices comes with specific information that is like just a part of it.
There we go. That'll work. Okay. Name. Okay. All right. What else can I do at this point?
At this point, we're going to...
Player name. I know who that is.
What? Oh, you know that part.
And this is, I'm just like taking notes over here on this text pad as I go. And this, honestly, either whiteboarding and John Dahl says AI and image recognition too, scope creep.
Yeah, that is some scope creep right there.
This is, this actually is how I end up doing things. If I'm not using a whiteboard, I just have a text pad open and just go to town. So y'all are actually getting to see my, for better or worse, my consulting skills in action.
All right, so we're going to take some things from your race because the race has certain properties as well.
Okay.
You have ability score increases. Okay.
All right, we need to do some indenting here. Okay, so
because you chose half orc, and your strength goes up by 2, and your constitution goes up by 1, just by virtue of your race. So you're going to see.
What did you call it?
Your strength.
Ability modifiers?
No, just your ability score.
Ability score.
Yes.
Okay.
The ability score is the big number that goes here. And the modifier is the little number that gets assigned depending on what the big number is.
The sneakers also affect the race. Puns abound.
Oh, that's so bad.
I don't get that one.
I was talking about sneaky types, and he says the sneakers affect the race, like the go fasters you put on.
I missed that one. I was a little slow.
Because you're busy.
Okay, you said strength?
It goes up by 2. And your
so, like, do I put that over here?
We've got to assign the base scores first. I'm going to tell you all this stuff, and then we're going to talk about the base scores.
Okay.
So, I'm not being as...
This is complicated.
It is complicated. Just put con, C-O-N, +1.
Is that Constitution?
Yes.
+1. Okay.
Blah, blah, blah.
I'm like...
Okay, I don't know how you want to handle this, but alignment is basically part of the role play part of the game. Okay. It can influence stuff, but it doesn't necessarily have to. Some groups play and alignment doesn't really key into it.
That's a choice. I know what that one is.
Yeah, it is a choice. And
chaotic good.
You're going to be a chaotic good?
Well, no, I mean, I'm chaotic good.
You are very chaotic good. So what alignment is your orc going to be? Half orcs inherit a tendency towards chaos from their orc parents and not strongly inclined toward good.
I can live with that.
Okay, so you would be like chaotic neutral? Or You can be chaotic, whatever. It's fine. But that's one thing you want to consider is while the race is a choice, an alignment is a choice. Maybe you want to put in a suggestion of something.
The kids from Stranger Things can do it, so can you.
Yeah, I love how D&D is now like cool because of Stranger Things. When I was playing it, when it was definitely not cool, I thought it was cool.
You liked it before it was cool?
I liked it before it was cool. I'm a D&D hipster. But see, alignment is a choice, but your race can influence it. The game gives guidance you don't necessarily have to follow.
Okay.
You could play a lawful good orc if you want, but maybe some way to say, to provide the information for the race that says, okay, here is the suggestions because of your race or whatever.
Okay.
And there's a lot of that in the setup here is, okay, this is what's suggested for what you pick.
All right, so these are the modifiers that the race.
Those are modifiers to. Those are racial modifiers.
Racial modifiers.
Yes, racial modifiers to your ability scores.
Okay, and then you mentioned something else.
We were talking about alignment and how it's a choice, but there are suggestions. I can't believe you never want to play this with me. It's so much fun.
Okay, so alignment suggestions. I'm sorry, this is a lot. All right. Okay, so what's next?
All right, well, let's set your ability scores. I'm going to look up the information in the guide, the player's guide, regarding barbarians. And what that's going to tell us, this is your class.
Okay, so class has a bunch of stuff tied to it, too.
Yes.
Okay. Okay, so I'm going to move, I'm actually going to update this choice to a, just kind of thinking as I go. Andrew's wife wants to help. We need a 4-person stream of building this.
Yes! I should have let other people in on this. That would have been great. Strength and Constitution are your most important. Oh, those are your saving throws. Never mind. Hold on. I gotta read. I've never made a barbarian.
Okay, so like, what are you looking at right now?
This is the player's handbook, and basically what it's telling you is it'll say, first put your highest ability score in strength, followed by constitution.
Okay, so this stuff is like description.
Yeah. This is where this is telling you like your scores and how to build it to optimize it for the best results in battle and all that. Okay. So your highest score should go into your strength. And that was at 18. You're taking notes.
I am taking notes. Okay, so what was that again?
So this says that first put your highest ability score in strength, followed by constitution.
Okay.
So the numbers you rolled earlier are those numbers we're dealing with now. The highest one you rolled was 18 because I hate you. And
yeah, that was my straight sixes.
Yes, and then the second highest is a 17. Oh my gosh, this is an amazing character.
Orc Hit Things is solid.
Orc Hit Things is solid. Second, choose. Okay, that's telling you background. Things that don't matter as a barbarian are, and this is me going off the top of my head, but
that's a suggestion, not an app requirement. Oh, the highest, Andrew, you're talking about the highest ones going into.
Yeah, you don't have to do it. At the end of the day, all of this is your choice. You can have a very weak barbarian, but most of his abilities are based on strength. So if you have a very weak barbarian, he's not going to be very effective in battle.
Got it. Okay. So I could put these numbers wherever I want.
Mm-hmm. So if you know down the line you're going to level up and be a barbarian, but then multi-class into like cleric, maybe you want to have a high wisdom and be a really wise, really skinny orc hit things. It depends on what the overall plan is.
Okay. All right. I got to make some adjustments here real quick. entities. I don't know if I spelled that right, but we'll go with it.
Yeah, y'all feel free to pipe up because, like I said, I've been working the same character for 4 years now, and it takes everything in me just to level her up. So
this is intensive.
It's intensive.
This is like real intensive. We haven't even gotten to the math yet. Creating a character. Okay. Don't have. Well. Here we go. Roll for ability scores. All right. Okay. Continuing along the lines, we're assigning our ability scores.
Yes, we're assigning ability scores.
And the player handbook has recommendations, but you don't have to follow them.
Yes.
And is that like a common thing throughout this, where the book makes recommendations, but you don't have to follow them?
Yes.
Okay. All right, so let's continue assigning our scores.
Your overall, one thing to keep in mind is you're going to want to keep the ability to have custom stuff. Because, like, my DM gave me a spell storing ring that's different than the in-game spell storing rings. It makes me kind of broke. It's ridiculous. But they need the ability to create custom stuff, items, and all that. And we'll get to that with equipment. But the ability to manually set and override whatever you have, whatever the system puts in there, is going to be needed.
Okay. All right. So it's really more of a guidebook.
Yes.
Really more of guidelines, not rules.
Okay.
Savvy.
So for a barbarian, intelligence is your dump stat. So we're going to put the 9 in there. No one cares how smart you are, just as long as you hit things.
I'm half as smart as I am strong.
Yeah, well, okay. And then you have 2 15s and a 12. I would recommend putting one of the 15s in wisdom, just because wisdom saves are pretty common.
Okay.
You put the 17 in dex. You want it in con.
Okay.
Now, do you want to be quick hit things, or do you want to be intimidating? What's more important to you? Because barbarians have this ability called intimidating presence. So if you want to be intimidating, you would want to put the higher score in charisma, because that's like your force of personality.
Shoot first, ask questions later.
Okay, then you want dex. Put the 15 in dex and put the 12 in charisma.
Okay.
And there you go. Now, it's
not orc intimidate things, it's orc hit things.
Orc hit things, that's right. Okay, so each of these scores has a modifier assigned to it. And this is just a table in the player's handbook that you just go according. I don't know if there's math behind it.
Can you like send me that PDF or something?
Well,
so I can like pull it up and
show what we're doing here?
Show what we're doing?
Okay, maybe, I guess. Where do you want me to send it to you through?
You can send it to me on Slack. That's fine.
I guess. Where is it? There it is. It's a big book.
It's a big book?
It's a big book. I'm just going to warn you. And it's easier to, I don't know, maybe it'll be easier on your machine because mine isn't powerful. But...
Okay.
There are lots of tables of information throughout this book.
Everything a player needs to create heroic characters for the world's greatest role-playing game.
Blah, blah,
blah. Okay, so, where are we? You said something about tables and modifiers?
I know this information by heart, though. Do you want to show it, or can I just tell it to you?
I'm.
You want to show it to the people?
Yeah. Well, I kind of want to show it to myself.
Okay.
Where do I go?
You go up.
Up.
Go to page 11 where you start step-by-step characters. Try that. Ability scores. There you go. See, this tells you a little bit about each one.
Okay.
And then there it is. Ability scores and modifiers.
Okay, so we've got ability scores and modifiers.
I really hate you for the scores you rolled.
Okay, so we've got, I don't know if this is necessarily an entity, but we'll classify it as such for now. And this is a lookup table?
Yeah. Or maybe. I don't know. It's just a table.
It's just a table?
Mm-hmm.
All right, so what am I using this table for?
Okay, you're using this table. Look on your character sheet.
Looking on the character sheet.
See the little bubble below the big number?
Mm-hmm.
That's your modifier, and that is the number that you will use to determine a lot of things throughout the game, like when you're using a skill to determine whether or not you succeed or whether you hit something.
Okay.
So the 18, if you look on your little table, has a +4 modifier.
Okay, yeah, so we got a lookup table.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Okay.
What's a lookup table? Why not just say table? It's a table that you look up stuff on?
Well, because some tables are used for logging and storing of information. The primary purpose is lookup tables are something where you turn around and you create those records once and then basically never change them. You never go back. All you're doing is reading that information. You're just looking up one value based off of another.
Yeah, and whatever. Sometimes this score will change for different reasons, like if you get cursed or when you level up or something like that. But the modifier will never change. Like if you have an 18, your modifier will never change from a +4. Your score may change from an 18 to a 16, and then your modifier would go down with it. But that is chained. That's
so if I have an 18 or 19, I have a +4. A 20 or 21, I have a 5, so on and so forth.
Yes.
Okay. So we've got basically a min score, a max score, and the modifier, it looks like.
You have golden retriever under your feet.
So those are my keys that I'm looking up by, and my modifier is my lookup. Okay. All right, so I take my 18.
Mm-hmm. You put that +4 in the little blank. +4.
It has to be a +4?
Oh, yes.
Okay.
Because you can have negative ability modifiers too, see?
So then Dex was, oh, okay.
2.
Is 2.
+2.
+2.
And the 17's a +3.
Oh, you know this off the top of your head?
Yeah.
How do you keep all that information in your head?
I'm really good at it.
Oh, okay. So it's not like there's a math to it? It's
no,
just
there's no math. It's just, well, you know, like an 18 is a +4, and I know to go up and down from there pretty much.
This one's a -1.
Yeah, well, it sucks to be you. You're dumb. You're work at things, not work reason and debate things.
That's not very nice.
That is really good base stats. Like, I'm very proud of you.
And then 12
It's +1.
is +1.
Because I'm getting ready to be a cleric, and my wisdom is a 13, and that's like the minimum you can have, and it's sad.
Okay, so those are the ability score modifiers.
Yes.
Okay, so... Okay.
Now, remember when we looked, you chose a race, there were modifiers there. Your strength and your constitution. So that strength +2 is going to bump your strength from an 18 to a 20. So you're going to add 2 to the 18 up there because of your race.
Okay.
So your race can change that number.
Modifiers to ability scores. Okay, and that's an ability score modifier. Okay, so that goes up to 20.
Yes, and when that goes up to 20,
then I have to look it up again?
Yes, that goes up to 5.
Okay.
You could probably automatically change this, so if whatever the ability score is, the modifier changes automatically.
Yeah.
Um,
and my constitution goes up 1 to 18.
And then that becomes a 4.
That becomes a 4?
Yes.
Okay. Okay.
All right. Now, let me look and make sure. Oh no, I closed it out.
This is harder than deja vu.
It's not hard. It is complicated. I'll spend like 3 hours creating a story. And this doesn't even touch creating backstory and traits and all that mess. We're not even going to do that. We're just doing the math part.
How does the traits and that stuff impact the game?
It impacts the story part of the game, the role play part of the game mostly.
Okay. So your behavior, not necessarily the game rules?
Yes, not necessarily the game rules. Not often. They're like the background you saw up there does have some effect. You'll pick a background, and that gives you a couple extra skills and things like that. Oh, so
backgrounds, there's like a set selection of backgrounds?
Yes, there's a set selection of backgrounds.
Oh, okay.
Oh, well, okay.
And those may end up being references anyway, but we'll make them choices for now and go from there.
Yep.
Huh. Okay.
Blah, blah, blah. I'm looking through the abilities.
We're looking through the ability scores?
I'm just making sure that's all set up. Okay, now you have proficiencies. All right, now let's do health next.
Okay, we're doing health next.
Okay, every different class gets a different, what's called a hit dice. That blank right there.
Okay.
And yours is a 1d12. It's like just d12. That's what you put.
D12?
Yes.
What's that based off of?
That's just a rule in the game.
A barbarian gets that hit dice.
Yes, the class gets that hit dice.
Okay.
Like the rogue gets a d8, I think. And this is the dice you roll to determine how high your health is, how many hit points you have. Okay? So the classes that are considered squishy, like your mages and stuff like that, they have a lower hit dice, like a d6 or whatever.
Do some of them have multiple?
No, you get 1 hit dice per level. Like you're a level 1 character, so you're going to get 1d12. And on the first level, it's always the max. Yes, so you're going, this is what's determining your hit points. So you're going to have 12 hit points because that's your hit dice, plus whatever your constitution bonus is. The modifier.
All right.
Math.
Okay, so hit dice is determined by class. I get 1 per level.
Yes. Oh, this isn't the book. You could just read the book. Read the manual.
Read the manual.
But yeah.
Just RTFM me.
I did just RTFM you.
Jeez.
This is like ultimate
brutal.
Ultimate nerd RTFM.
Okay, so I get 1 per level.
Yes.
And that's just a general across the board rule.
Yes. The first level maxes out. So if I had a D8, I would start with 8 points at the first level. With you, it's 12 because you have a D12.
Okay.
It's a 12-sided die. On the second level, you have to actually roll that dice. And then you would get whatever the dice roll is, plus your constitution modifier. You get to add your con modifier at every level.
A lot of rules.
There are a lot of rules, but this is like requirements gathering on any client we deal with because there's all kinds of little caveats and
absolutely.
I need these people to have this role and access this, but not that, you know. And we haven't even got into player rules versus DM rules yet.
Oh my!
I'm not the one you talk to for DM stuff. I can't DM.
All right, so
given the information I've told you, what is your current hit points
You said it was
1.
It was the 12 plus the 4.
Yes. For mathing.
16. I told you I don't math. This is what I have the computer for.
So question, at level 2, if you rolled a 5, how many would you add to that?
Oh, so I don't re-roll. I just roll for additional?
Mm-hmm. You add to it. So like at level, you know how
So I'd add 5 to it if I rolled
if you rolled the 5, you'd add the 5 to it, and then you would add your Constitution modifier again.
Oh, and then the Constitution modifier again.
Plus 4.
Okay, hold on a second.
Because you're adding your con modifier every time you level up.
Okay, so
I'm getting ready to go through this with number 1 son too.
Actually, no. Let's move this guy up to, because this is a character property, yes?
What, the hit die?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. The hit points do have some calculation in them, but the hit die, that is where the calculation comes from. That is part of the character class.
Okay, so it's base hit dice plus the Constitution modifier.
Mm-hmm.
And then after, or at each level.
After the first.
It's your hit dice roll.
Oh, look, you're making little calculations like to go in the code thing.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay. Got it.
Okay.
All right.
Proficiency bonus is an easy one. That one's determined by your level. I think they're the same for everybody. It's just determined by your level. So it'll be like a 1 right now.
So proficiency bonus is determined by level.
The 2. Yes, and I think it's the same for all classes. It's just when it's dependent on your character level. If you're a 10th level character, you have a +4. It doesn't matter if you're multi-classing or a barbarian or a mage or whatever.
Okay. So mine is...
Yours is +2 because you're level 1.
So is that another one of them lookup tables?
Yeah, that would be another lookup table.
Yeah, so as we're going through here, any of these, since there seems to be a lot of this table-based stuff, this will align really, really well to ServiceNow, since everything in ServiceNow is a table.
That's what I was saying.
We can align a lot of this stuff pretty easily just by creating these lookup tables. Heck, we might even be able to just use ServiceNow's lookup table feature. I don't know. We'll have to dig into that one.
Mm-hmm. You ready for what's next?
So that lookup table is...
This is the proficiency bonus with a level, and they put it on every.
So is that determined by the rate or the class as well?
It's on each class, but I think it's the same for every class.
Okay.
Like, let me look at the rogue one. I think they all start at 2 and go up from there. Yeah, they all start at 2 and go up to 6 by level 20. So it's the same on everyone. So you're turning this into an app, into a data structure as we go through it.
I'm not actually turning it into a data structure at this point. What I'm doing is just collecting some semi-structured notes. What I'll do after this is I'll actually take a look at what we've discussed. I may dig into the player's manual a little bit more to do some additional research on my own, but what I'll do is I will try to digest the system as you have described it to me, as the manual has described it to me, and then I will start thinking about it from my own experience, from my programming experience, comparing it against other things I've done before, to try and see if the way the model was described to me makes sense 100%, or if I have some other experience I can draw from that may better align to this particular model. So this is just kind of a model as you have, as I understand that you have described it to me. So this is just a starting point for me.
Okay.
You know, and that's one of those things that from my standpoint is very important, because one thing that we have to keep in mind as we're going through, and this is true whether you're a consultant or whether you're in-house at a customer, either way you slice it, you are still consulting somebody. The business is coming to you and asking for your input. And if you build something exactly the way somebody tells you to build it, you may miss really big opportunities. You know, the data model is one of the most important structures in your application. It is the hardest to change once you commit to it. You know, there are a lot of different styles of data models out there. I can model this from an object-oriented sense, which is kind of what we're doing right now. You've got a character, you've got race, you've got class, you have all these different entities. But that's only one way to slice a data model. There's lots of different ways you can slice it. You know, another example would be that we could model this potentially as a series of events where each of the choices that we have made, you know, there was a dice roll. Then I selected what attribute that applied to. And if we modeled this instead as a series of choices, as a series of events and decisions, we could end up with a very different data model, but one that might lend better to the mathematical calculations involved. So it's important to gather the information in one language, but then sit down and evaluate it against multiple different alternatives to determine which one makes the most sense for what you're trying to do. Because the reality is that in this scenario specifically, you are a player. You have a specific view. Not what I meant.
I'm a player. Okay, sorry.
You are, as a player of the game, you have a particular view of the game and of the system. You know, Megan, as the DM running the game, has a different view. She has a different slice of this. But what often goes overlooked is that the system itself, the game itself, has a perspective on itself. And you want to take each of those perspectives into consideration, because the data model doesn't have to be viewed directly by the player. You know, just because I model the under the hood data as a stream of events doesn't mean that I have to show nothing but a stream of events to the end user. That stream of events can be processed. You know, in fact, if you look at the triage app that I built most recently, that under the hood is modeled as a lightweight decision tree, but the widget data model is a series of events. It doesn't look like that from the end user perspective. From the end user perspective, it's a step-by-step questionnaire.
Yeah.
So you've got 3 different conceptual models in the application, each one designed for the purpose that it's serving. The widget model was designed to make it easy for the questionnaire to go forwards and backwards. next, previous, so that the user can rewind their steps through the questions. And just to kind of give folks a sense of that one, not GlideFast. This one was in personal dev. So as I answer questions in this questionnaire, I can go forwards or I can go backwards. Mm-hmm. And in order to model that forwards and backwards behavior, I modeled it as a series of events. So what you see as this option has been selected, you would think that, if I were to model this as an object-oriented, I would have a question and 2 responses, and this response dot selected would be true. But that's not how it's modeled under the hood at all. Instead, how I've modeled it is user has selected this option. User has viewed the next question. User has selected this option. User has gone back. And now when I hit back, all I do is I say discard these events. And I've immediately restored the previous state. I don't have to figure out which true and false to set. All I have to do is say, these events never happened. And so that's how the widget is built. But like I said, if you go under the hood even further, there's yet another data model under the hood that is more object-oriented, entity attribute-based. And that one is modeled as a questionnaire with a series of questions, and those questions yield certain results. Mm-hmm. So this data model is more in line with how a business user would understand it. The event model was necessary for the system to be able to execute sensibly. And then there's the view model, which is what makes sense to the end user. So this is just me collecting notes on how you are describing this particular model. This model may only show up in the UI. This may not form the underlying data model, or maybe it does. I don't know yet, but that's part of what this process is going through and determining which of these data models make sense in which place.
What's the best way to organize this information? Not just so the user can get what they need, but so the system can process everything correctly. Because this, as you've seen, is a very complex set of rules and all that.
Yeah, and see, if I had turned around and gone through, if we had dove in, and we'll kind of start working on wrapping this one up because we're coming close to 4:30 at this point. But if I were to take this character sheet here, I could easily create a table that has all of these as fields on it. A big, giant blob of data.
See, and that's what I originally was thinking of doing, was just, calculating myself and throwing it in there and putting a UI in the portal so I could just view it.
Right. And that certainly could be one way of doing it. But what happens is that when you make that decision early on and you just sling it, you end up in a situation where that data model is tough to change. If I want to turn around and, we've already seen a couple modifiers here that's modifying strength, and I imagine we're going to come across a few other things that modify. Why do you keep opening? Stupid email.
There's race, there's items, there's spells, all kinds of things will modify these numbers.
Right.
Boost them, detract from them, whatever. And just putting it in there, it still leaves the user with having to figure that out manually.
Right. And so, one way to model that is using the sheet where the way that we just did it, where, my racial modifier gives me a +2 to strength. So I come in here and I manually update that to 20. But now let me ask you a question. Did we apply the racial modifier?
Yes.
How do you know?
because I'm looking at the score and I know what your base score was and I know what the modifier was, so I know the
Would
difference.
you know that a week from now?
Probably, but you know, it's like I've said, I've had this character for 4 years now, right. And I have a note where it lists her original 6 values. And sometimes when I'm leveling up, I have to go back and calculate because my notes are all over the place.
Right.
And to keep all that straight and make sure that I'm applying the rules correctly and not overdoing or underdoing, and
right.
It's impossible to keep track of over time.
Right.
But what you're talking about gives a way for the user to
right.
say, okay, this is how I got from level 1. At this level, I increased this stat, and then I put on this necklace, and that increased it further.
And so, from a data model perspective, you can take this conceptually as strength is a property of a character entity, and we modify that property anytime something changes. And if you go with that approach, what you would want to do is log the changes, so that you could go back and read the log to determine if you had taken certain actions or not.
Yeah.
The other way is for the log to be your data model. If your data model is nothing more than, I set my strength to 20, my strength increased by 2 because of the racial modifier, I put on an item that increased my strength by 2 more, now I can calculate my strength on the fly as opposed to storing that value.
Yeah.
So there's different ways of modeling that data, and especially if you have a lot of modifiers and a lot of stuff moving around, and I've seen this happen in other applications before where people, something will happen to a record, and the first question is, well,
how did that get modified?
How did that get modified? Who did that? And if you don't have auditing enabled, the answer is, no idea. Nobody knows. It just happened.
So can ServiceNow do that to show like the history of each of these items to where
this as a entity attribute data model, and we could put audit logging on it. And so the audit logging would tell us when things changed. Or we could simply model the data itself as a stream of events to begin with. And at that point, instead of having a strength property that we mutate and change all the time, instead we could have a sequence of changes to strength. Strength when you start the game is 0. You haven't rolled a dice, you haven't done anything. Your strength starts as 0. Then you roll a dice and you set it. You log that you set it. You log that you added 2. You log that you added 2 more, and then when you get to, you were talking about will saves, and I kind of know what that is from what you've described before on it.
The saving throws and all that.
Right. At some point, you take an action where you have to check it against your scores. And instead of going back and saying, what is my current strength? Instead, what you would do is you would say, what are all the changes to my strength? Add that up. What are all the changes to,
You want to know the current state of it.
Eventually.
After all those changes.
Eventually, you want to know the current state. The question is, do you store the current state, or do you calculate the current state on the fly as needed and only record the changes to it?
See, I like the idea of being able to calculate it.
Right. Well, and that's the thing, is that if I turn around and put on a ring that gives me +2 to strength, that brings me up to 22. I can either simply increase a strength attribute to 22 and note somewhere that it was because of the ring, or I can say that I put on a ring +2 strength and later on do the math. And, what makes sense in a pen and paper world is to go ahead and update it, because
you don't have to do math every
time. Unless you're a mathematical wizard that can do it in your head in fractions of a second, you are saving a lot of time by caching that information in this little square block. But a computer can add very quickly. So just because this data model makes sense to us visually doesn't mean it makes sense to the computer computationally. And those are the things that I want to take a look at as we're digging through this data model. I want to find out, does the entity attribute model make sense? Where does it make sense? Where does it not make sense? One of the things that I've been considering as we've been talking about this is anything that is mathematical in nature, treating it as a stream of events, treating it as a stream of changes, and then treating the other information, name, what class, what race, treating that stuff as an object-oriented, entity-based model. So those are the things that I'm trying to look at as we go through this. We may do more of this in the next session. Maybe we'll take some of this offline and.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. I can go ahead and help you fill out the rest of this so we can get more of this information,
right?
And we can summarize and say, okay, these are the different things we've looked at,
right.
And then you could talk about the choices more of the different
right.
types of data models you're considering and.
Because that was a lot of time for just a little bit of information.
Yeah, because we haven't even got into some of these other calculations and other things that are made.
And I know I got to pick
equipment and
and
feats
not
and
spells, but whatever
abilities
or kit things equivalent of spells is.
Mm-hmm.
That stuff.
Like the
with you, so I can understand exactly how this model works. I'm starting to get a picture.
And this is why workshops take as long as they do.
This is why workshops are the longest part. When we sit down to actually build this data model, it'll probably take a fraction of the time. We'll have to try and keep track of how much time we spent requirements gathering versus execution. But what I can tell you is that it's going to be much more worthwhile. Mm-hmm. When I turn around and I look at the data models that I slap together, I've had some customers that I've worked with where we were like, we need to make this happen. We need to make it happen now. And we built something out as a request, as a catalog request.
Yeah.
And then later on down the line, that catalog request, they're like, well, we want to build a larger application around this. And it's like, well, you've got everything tied up in variables.
Yeah, you and I were discussing this earlier because I was like, well, I just want to see my character. Well, what if you want to expand this so you can actually play the game in ServiceNow? But I don't know if I want that. Well, we have to go ahead and consider that up front so we can at least set it up for easily expanding into that later.
Right.
Or not. And if you don't, fine. But
and I've had instances where I have had to migrate attachments, comments, tasks, all of the data associated with the request items, variables, all of that information I had to pick up and migrate it over to a completely different set of tables in another instance because the data model we used originally did not match what we wanted the application to be later on. And it took at least 3 times, if not more, than it would have if we had just built the application the way that we had thought about it initially. Mm-hmm. If we had just built the application, it would have taken a fraction of the time. Just the migration alone took a couple of weeks to build out, test it, make sure that the users all lined up, make sure the usernames lined up, make sure that the log entries came up right. There was so much effort that went into migrating from one data model to another that making those decisions up front about what your data model should be and making sure it's flexible enough to accommodate change is extremely important. It will cost you a lot of time in the long run. And while the general sense in technology is that eventually the data model always changes, the question is how soon? You
sound like you've been burned by that.
I have had data models that are built-in apps that have been out there for the last 8 or 9 years, however long I've been on this platform, that have fundamentally not changed in 8 or 9 years, mm-hmm. and have brought immense value to the customers and have brought that much more value that they may not even recognize simply because they haven't had to touch that application in 8 or 9 years except to improve upon it and add new things to it. But other customers that I've worked with, short timelines, short deadlines, high pressure, you make sacrifices. You make choices in the moment that you know may not be the best choices to make. You communicate that it may not be best, but it is the best choice for that moment in time. And so you execute it, but the cost is that months later, a year later, you end up having to go back and rip that entire application apart, gut it, and rebuild it the right way.
To make some kind of change, which is ultimately, if I just started putting this together and throwing, it's what you would have had to do. You would have had to rip everything I built out and put it back in, even down to the widget level. It wouldn't be just calling the field. It would be dealing with the calculations and the appearance of it and all that.
One of the worst things in the world to happen on any kind of technology project is for a customer to come up to you and say, it would be amazing if this application could do this too, and it seems so simple. And you look at the underlying technology and say, well, your options are either A, to not do it, B, to re-implement your entire application, or C, to create some really, really gnarly integration layer that sometimes will probably fail, but don't worry, you can add some support and administration structure to your organization to make sure that there's somebody keeping an eye on this. And those are your three options.
Yeah, I deal with that even on the front end doing service portal widgets where, okay, I want to do this simple thing with the look of the type ahead search. What a lot of people don't realize, for example, is that type ahead search bar is actually a field and a button next to it. So you're really limited in some of the some stuff is more complicated than it should be. I'll put it that way.
Exactly. If you look as primary service portal developer, if you look at the HTML structure as roughly equivalent to a data model, you will understand the complexities. There's some CSS that you simply can't apply to get a desired result if the HTML structure doesn't line up to it.
Yeah, you're just stuck.
And the same thing happens under the hood at the data layer, where if your data model does not support certain things, if your data model is not structured a certain way, it simply can't support certain behaviors, or it can't support it easily without extensive modification. And so this is why I spend a lot of time before implementing a data model. There is a lot of care and concern that goes into it. It's not something that you get good at overnight, that's for sure. My own data models have burned me a lot.
Yeah, I'm just starting to figure out, okay, well, what is this going to look like down the road? And you've done a lot to help show me, okay, no, there's your specific case, but generalize that information into something better. And it's hard.
Yep. And one of the more complicated things in ServiceNow is, one of the big advantages ServiceNow has is that it automatically generates those form and list views. Your UI is tightly coupled to your data model. The problem that you run into with that, though, is that some data models end up being weird in ServiceNow. Stuff that if you were building a database layer data model and then a UI on top of it, stuff that would make sense there looks fundamentally weird in ServiceNow, because ServiceNow is automatically going to give you form view, list view, related lists, highly normalized database views, for example. Highly normalized database tables is basically where, if you go to the absolute extreme, basically every property is its own table. So like you could have a table for a strength attribute, for example.
Why would you want a whole table for that?
Well, in certain environments in certain application structures, highly efficient queries where you only have to query a handful of attributes makes a lot of sense. And in those types of environments, having a highly normalized database can be very efficient for queries, can be very efficient for lookups, as long as you don't have to do a lot of joins. ServiceNow takes a much less normalized approach in most of the data model, which results in much flatter tables with a lot more properties on it. And, you know, so that particular data model works really, really well with ServiceNow, but a highly normalized data model just looks weird. You know, a form with one field on it is just absurd. And trying to coach a user on navigating that type data structure where everything's a reference field would be a madhouse. You know, but in certain cases, it makes a lot of sense. So it depends, and there's a lot of different ways of slicing data models, and you know, it takes a lot of analysis into the different perspectives of the data model, because even though we like to talk about, you know, one source of truth in ServiceNow, the sad reality is that different people can see the data model in different ways. You do want to have one source of truth. You do want one source that everything else pulls from, but sometimes you have to give different views, different slices of the same source of truth in order to make everybody happy. And that's just the nature of, one, how different people look at views or look at data, two, how different people operate with data. You know, you mentioned that there's, when we were discussing this last night, you mentioned that there are some things that the DM knows that the players don't know. Different views of the data model. You know, so you have to take all of that into consideration when you're building out these data models to make sure it's effective. Otherwise, you can end up with really complex security rules, really complex ACLs, maddening business logic, and you can end up with the player's view stepping on the toes of the DM's view and vice versa. And you don't want to end up in those situations. So it's important to look at the data model from the different perspectives, understand it from a holistic approach, and then determine what the best single source model would look like. So that's kind of what we're going through. We'll take some of this offline because clearly this is going to take a lot more than a single session to nail this down. But hopefully next time when we reconvene on this one, we'll have some more decisions made and some more things set in terms of what we can start building. So that's what we'll look forward to next time. And, you know, hopefully we'll have some fun with this. And, you know, I've been productive enough with some of the COVID apps and everything else we've been building. So it's nice to do something that's, you know, kind of senseless and fun for once.
Not senseless, it's important. But yeah, this will be a lot of fun.
So, yeah, thanks for joining everybody. I hope you enjoyed it, and we'll see you next time.
Have a good night.